Gone global. Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, it's been a long, very emotional and at times difficult day in the High Court today where the Charlie Gard case is being heard. This, I think, really is the last legal step in this case. And as you know, on this show, we followed this story all the way through. We're waiting for the parents and for their spokesman, Alistair Seaton Marsden, who's been on this programme this week, to come out, and we'll bring you more as that goes on. I guess the main piece of news today is that an American doctor who's offered a treat, little Charlie Gard, has said that he believes, a 10% chance he could improve the baby's condition. So there's no, miracle necessarily on offer here, and medical opinion, certainly in the UK, is that they've tried everything that they can. But as you know, I've been following this case because I believe in parental choice. And I think provided the child is not going to go through any further suffering, they should be allowed to have that one last chance. So more of that over the course of the next hour as news emerges. Meanwhile, well, we talked quite a lot last night about Michel Barnier, the European Union's chief negotiator, a man who in the past, I'd said, had perhaps been rather more reasonable than some of those I've come to meet in Brussels. But I did notice yesterday a slight change in tone. I mean, he did seem to be a lot more bullish and a lot more aggressive than he had been in the past. Because if you remember last night's debate, he was demanding that post-Brexit, the European Court of Justice should have a say on the rights of EU citizens living in the UK. Well, today, and I really am quite surprised by this, because Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, Nicola Sturgeon from the SNP, and the Welsh First Minister, Carwyn Jones, have all been to the European Commission building in Brussels and have all held individual meetings with Michel Barnier. This despite the fact that Barnier and the real boss man, Mr Juncker, said in the past they would not negotiate separately with Scotland or anybody else. And by the way, part of that deal was that they would negotiate with us as 27 together, and that we were not individually as a country to go around and meet their government. So I wonder if Monsieur Barnier is now meeting Sturgeon, Jones and Corbyn. I wonder whether perhaps it's time for us to start sending our ministers on aeroplanes to Hungary and to Poland. I really do wonder whether perhaps it's time that we did this. And I'm asking you, do you think these meetings today are against our country's national interests? You can call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text to 84850. You can tweet your opinions, and the polite ones I'll read out, to Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch us live, of course, on Facebook by going to lbc.co.uk. And look, I have to say, I think that what is happening here is that Barnier is going for divide and conquer. He's speaking to people, and not so much the case of Corbyn, although in the case of Keir Starmer, his shadow Brexit secretary, he's certainly still a Remainer. He's talking to people who effectively want to overthrow the referendum. What about the British government? What happens next week or the week after, whenever it is? David Davis, the Brexit secretary, stands up in the House of Commons and says, this is what is happening in Brussels. And then Jeremy Corbyn says, oh, no, it isn't, because he told me something completely different. And I think, like it or not, we voted for Brexit on June 23rd last year. And like it or not, 85% of people who voted in the general election voted for parties who said they were for Brexit and for leaving the single market. And like it or not, Theresa May is our Prime Minister with a Brexit agenda. And I think, frankly, what these politicians are doing by going behind the back of the British government and speaking to Barnier, frankly, they are colluding with somebody who doesn't have our national interests at heart. He has the interests of the European project at heart. I think the whole thing is outrageous, and I think, frankly, Barnier particularly is behaving very, very badly indeed. Simon in Cambridge, where is Mrs May now in all of this if Monsieur Barnier is speaking directly to other party leaders?
I think Mrs May is in a very to be honest.
Yeah.
I think we've actually voted for this. We've voted to allow Mr. Bates inside of borders.
Simon, this line is impossible. So I'm going to have to let you go, but we will get you back. When you're on a better line. Let's go to Tony in Rugeley in Staffordshire. Tony, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. I wonder if people have the time to go onto YouTube and look on the Polish demonstrations against immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
I think if England and Poland were to get together talking, the EU would be extremely worried.
Yes.
The Polish demonstrations, which take place almost monthly, are scary if you're an immigrant. They're very, very nationalistic and very, very pro-Catholic, and not so much anti-Muslim, but very much for us and their own culture.
Yes, I mean, I know, Tony, when you go to Central and Eastern Europe, you find attitudes, particularly about religion, that we frankly would blanch at. And I've seen that myself in years inside the European Parliament, working with MEPs from those countries. But, Tony, my real question is, has our national interest been served? Has our Prime Minister, our elected Prime Minister, has she surely not been damaged by these meetings going on behind her back?
Of course, and I wonder who authorised it. It seems really undemocratic for these people just to be trotting over there without any sort of mandate.
Well, if you remember that, going back a little bit after the last general election, Nicola Sturgeon said she was off to Brussels. And off she went to Brussels. She flew over from Edinburgh to Brussels, and she was going to meet Mr. Juncker, the boss of the European Commission. And he said, oh, no. We're not going to meet you. We're not going to negotiate separately. We will deal with the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom will deal with us as 27. And I think he's completely changed the rules of the game today, Barnier. And I think, frankly, what those political leaders have done is to act against our settled national interest, Tony. That's my view.
I think you probably know better than anybody the doublespeak that they use in Brussels.
What it is the new EU language, I think. They tried Esperanto, it didn't work, but doublespeak is pretty effective. Tony, I thank you for your thoughts and your opinions. I'm going to go back. Simon, can we hear you?
Yes, I'm much better now, Nigel. Good evening.
Right, so we were talking about, I was asking you, what is Mrs May's negotiating hand, or David Davis's negotiating hand, now that these separate meetings have been taking place?
I think it's very weak, actually. But I think really we voted for this. Mm-hmm. The general election, we voted in essence to weaken our hand. And I don't believe that we can actually guarantee that Brexit's going to go through. And I think at some point we've either got to get behind the Conservative Party and Theresa May and say, yes, we are really going to do this, and actually stop sniping from the sides. Otherwise, Barnier is just going to drive a coach and horses through the UK, without a shadow of a doubt. And Sturgeon will allow him to do it for pleasure.
Well, and as I say, Simon, now when the Prime Minister or David Davis says this is how it is, they will get contradicted, because these three leaders who've been will no doubt keep up communications and contact, and the British government is going to find itself being contradicted by its own side. I mean, this negotiation, we voted for it. It's in the interest of all of us to get the right deal, and yet Simon, some of these party leaders actually want to reverse the Brexit process. That's the truth of it.
I think it is. And to be honest, I think if you gave the Labour Party the choice of power and not going through with Brexit, I think they would have power rather than go through with Brexit. And I think that's a real danger. I think a lot of these Labour guys are absolutely dreaming if they think the Labour Party wouldn't have power rather than Brexit.
It's a weird one, Simon, isn't it? Because Corbyn himself is an old Bennite. He's been against the European project for longer than I've been, and goodness me, that's saying something. He's voted against all the European treaties all through, 33 years in Parliament. He sacked 3 front benchers the other day, and yet, of course, the truth is it's a mess, because clearly Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, takes a different view, and most, not all, there are Eurosceptics on the backbenches, but most of their backbenchers too. Simon, I thank you. Barnier is attempting to undermine British democracy, comes in. A text from Kent, which I rather agree with. Let Scotland chat with the EU. We can use the money we give them for university and prescriptions to help the NHS, says David from Windsor. Not quite on point, but never mind. Nigel, I'm absolutely seething about this. But it just shows how terrified the EU bully boys really are. Their house of cards is going to crumble after the UK leaves, says Steve. Well, I'll tell you what is going to crumble, their budget, because they like our money. And the other thing, Steve, that is going on that is not even being talked about in the UK media is the migrant crisis is reaching a new pitch. The numbers that are coming up, as the weather's got better, the numbers that are coming into Italy are now higher than in any of the previous years. And most of the other European countries, when Italy says, please can we have EU solidarity, are saying, no, we're really too busy to speak to you at the moment. So this is causing massive tensions and massive problems within. And I think the EU's in trouble. And I do wonder whether perhaps Barnier realises that the Hungarian foreign minister, when he says the UK's got a stronger hand in this negotiation than the EU, I wonder whether Barnier himself is now beginning to think that. I wonder whether what you're now seeing is lobbying. And I've seen some evidence of this, lobbying going on behind the scenes from German car makers saying, Monsieur Barnier, for goodness sake, get a sensible trade deal or we'll lose jobs in Munich and in Bavaria. And I wonder whether the Irish government, under its new Taoiseach, are perhaps saying, without agricultural exports to the UK, the Irish rural economy is in real trouble. I wonder whether he sees that weakness and he now is using that in an effort to divide us. Either way, I don't like it one little bit. And I think I was right yesterday to say there was a slight change of tone in the way Barnier was approaching the whole Brexit process. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15. So the EU big negotiator, Michel Barnier, meets with Sturgeon, Corbyn and Carwyn Jones, going round the back of the British government, and I'm asking you, is this in the country's national interest? I think this is seriously bad news for our Brexit negotiation. It allows Mrs May and David Davis to constantly be contradicted by other party leaders. It is, I think, from Monsieur Barnier, a game of divide and conquer. Rhonda on Facebook says, what's the problem with them visiting? Do you all feel threatened or something? Yes, Rhonda, we do. We feel the Brexit negotiation, the fair play, the Queensberry rules that Mr Juncker talked about are now, frankly, out of the window. They have broken the pact that we had, which was they would negotiate with us, 27 of them, and in turn they would speak to the British government and not speak to the separate nations as part of the United Kingdom. Jeremy Corbyn, of course, is English. He's not even part of a different country. He's just leader of a different party. So, Rhonda, yes, I do feel there's a threat to the whole Brexit process with what has happened today. Carol says, we are no longer the United Kingdom. Scotland, Wales and Corbyn are proving this. Justin says we voted for full control over trade, money, borders, laws and much more. We won't accept anything left. Craig, we must leave completely. If May fails... Oh, here we go. I knew it wouldn't take long. If May fails, we must get Moggy in. We're going to have a whole evening's phone-in show about Mog, I think, and perhaps get him on as our guest of the evening, because he does seem to excite a lot of passion. Chris in Chester is my next caller. Good evening, Chris. Is what happened today bad news for the Brexit negotiations?
Good evening, Mr. Farage. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome.
Listening, thank you. I have to say first, I'm not a fan, but if I can just make my point.
That's all right. We're just about living in a free democracy, Chris, so that's the way it should work, isn't it?
Just about. The European troops are coming down the street, I'm sure. I just wanted to maybe put this point across.
Yeah.
The Scottish Welsh and the opposition leader of the United Kingdom, and there would have probably been an Irish one as well if there was actually the assembly in place, they went to Europe. Barnier did not go to them. But does not this reflect the actual political situation within the United Kingdom? We have to be honest. I know you're hardened Brexiteer, and the EU said water was wet. You disagree with it, but.
Not necessarily, Chris. Not necessarily. I've never said that everything the EU does is wrong, or bad or that every law's ludicrous. I've never said that, Chris. What I have...
No. I'm not, Nigel, I'm not trying to catch it out, on one line or anything along those lines. All I'm saying to you is, does this today not represent the correct political situation in the United Kingdom? The British people, the United Kingdom-wide, are not 70, 80% behind Brexit.
70,
you know what I mean?
well, 70%, Chris, were the latest figure.
I know voted for, X, Y, Z.
Poll after poll, Chris, suggests, and I'm talking about 4 or 5 separate company opinion polls over the last sort of 7 or 8 weeks, suggest that something like 70% of the British public, regardless of how they voted last year or how they thought, felt the government should simply get on with Brexit.
Oh, no, look, I'm not turning around. Look, I can throw 5 polls at you. You can throw 5 polls at me. Do you know what I mean? I will show the different thing. All I'm saying to you is that while I know this is a very, very one-sided, and, it's a radio show, it's not political.
It's not one-sided. I reject the one-sided because you're on and anybody else can come on.
Oh, no, agreed. My apologies, Mr. Farage.
Thank you.
All I'm saying to you is that rather than lambasting Barnier by turning around and saying he's threatening Brexit, he's threatening this, and, giving this very, very high-level, pretty much out of context view, in my opinion, to me this represents the political situation within the United Kingdom. Leavers are now turning Remainers. Remainers are turning Leavers. It's not like we triggered Article 50 the day after the Brexit vote. We're a year in, people have taken stock, and 3 of the 5 United Kingdom nations of families, a family of nations, voted against Brexit. Do you know what I mean? So we can't just turn around and say to Theresa May, who lost her majority, and say, go ahead, hard Brexit.
Well, let's look at the arithmetic, Chris. I mean, OK, Scotland voted in favour of Remain, Northern Ireland voted in favour of Remain, England voted to leave, and Wales, of course, voted to leave. I mean, how Carl Wyn-Jones has got the front, given that he's the First Minister for a country that clearly voted to leave to try and stop the whole thing. I mean, I find it extraordinary, Chris. And Chris, also, it's worth remembering that, of course, within the part of the British Isles, but again, a completely different country, Ireland, they twice, of course. They twice, of course. Okay, but I mean, it's fair point to say that they twice, of course, voted against European treaties. So, Chris, you think this is all democratic and open and fair. Let me throw this back at you. How now can May and indeed David Davis, how can they present the Brexit negotiations to the country when they're now at risk of being contradicted by other party leaders?
Well, OK, no, that's a very, very good point. Just extremely quickly about the Irish referendum. They rejected it. A new referendum was put in place.
Oh, I know.
They rejected, came back, and then they voted in favour. No, agreed. And from a British perspective, running referendums...
Monstrous. Outrageous.
But holds a lot of referendums, Nigel.
It wasn't the best of 3, was it? The Lisbon Treaty referendum in Dublin was not the best of 3. It's outrageous they were asked to vote again, surely.
No, Nigel, you've got to be honest with yourself as well.
I'm trying.
Holds your point of view. Not everybody holds your point of view about Europe. I'm an Irish European with a British passport. All right, now I know people like just listen to your show say, right? There's millions, hundreds of millions of people across the continent, right, who do not hold the EU with such contempt. Do you know what I mean? All governments are bad in everybody's view. Anyway, but look, that's a thing for another thing. But your question is, can Theresa May go to Brussels and turn around and say, listen, I want X, Y, Z? No. Do you know why? She lost her majority. People didn't, you know what I mean? She went on there and said, give me a strong hand for Brexit.
But Jeremy Corbyn, of course, too, in a sense, said, I'm for Brexit, although I agree the Labour Party's position is confusing. Chris, tell me, in a word, has today been a good day for the UK's Brexit negotiation?
No, it hasn't.
No, I agree with that, Chris, and thank you. First-time caller. We're never going to agree, but call again, please, because as I did point out in fairly short order there, we welcome all opinions on this show. In fact, there are many nights when I have more callers that disagree than agree, and that's fine. That works. Dexter in Edinburgh. Has the PM's position and therefore actually the nation's position on Brexit been undermined today?
Oh, definitely. No doubt about that. I think we've been played by the EU, and I think that Jeremy Corbyn is playing right into their hands. I think that there's something quite unsalubrious about the way he's undermining the PM's position, and pursuit of what seems to me his own party interests, because Labour are divided in this issue. Corbyn is trying to face 2 ways. He's trying to face the
the young vote who joined his party recently because they're for staying in the EU, and he's trying to satisfy the UKIPers who switched to him again, returned the vote, because he gave the clear impression, maybe he didn't say it, but he gave the clear impression that he wanted to leave the single market and customs union. Indeed, Barry Gardiner, his shadow trade minister, said that there's no way they could stay in the customs union, but he's forgotten all about that now. You know, he's so mealy-mouthed now in what he says about these things.
It's actually quite confusing, isn't it? It's quite confusing to work out where Labour really stand, because they do all contradict each other, it seems, virtually every day. Is it time, Dexter, that, you know, given that Barnier has broken the rules that he set out and Juncker set out, or Juncker, to be fair, set out, you know, after the British general election, after the referendum, when we all knew where we were, is it time that we then broke the rules and we started going and negotiating directly with countries and going behind the back of Barnier?
Oh, definitely. I think we've got to stop playing by the rules, because we've been played. We have been played.
It looks
and
like
we've been
it.
undermined by our own media and a political class who say one thing but they believe another. You know, they don't have the heart and soul into, you know, getting a good deal for Brexit.
So they're playing political advantage, Dexter. That's what you're saying, that Corbyn is playing political advantage. He'd love to see this government fall and have a general election. That's what you're really saying, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's trying to face two ways at once. What he should be doing, if he was any kind of a statesman, he would agree on those areas of Brexit that both he and the Conservative Party have agree upon, have consensus on, and proceed on that basis.
Yeah.
And that way we'd have a strong British hand. We'll be united against this ridiculous bureaucracy who think they can tell us what we can do.
Well, I tell you what, Dexter.
Out of order.
I tell you what, Dexter. This ridiculous bureaucracy, as you call it, did today, effectively, and yesterday, start telling us what to do. Thank you for your call, Jeanette in Coventry. So, what do you think of the behaviour of our leading politicians going today to meet Monsieur Barnier?
Oh, hi, Nigel. It's really nice to speak to you.
Good evening.
I just think that they've been undermining our position, really. I think, to be honest, I really think we should eject them from politics altogether, the three of them, because I think that they're just not doing us any favours. I mean, what the hell do they think that they were actually trying to achieve? This is what I can't understand.
I think that's easy. Nicola Sturgeon wants to reverse the referendum. In fact, she wants to reverse every referendum. She doesn't agree with any referendum results over the course of the last few years. Carwyn Jones, you know, in Brexit Wales, wants to reverse the referendum, and Jeremy Corbyn wants to bring down the government and force a general election. Now, I mean, that's why they're there, Jeanette. But I feel very strongly it's undermining our national position. It's undermining the Brexit negotiations. So you'd like to see them ejected from politics. How would we do that, Jeanette?
Well, I don't know. The thing is, I think that, I know Jeremy Corbyn is always going on about how he wants to, he thinks that he should have a mandate to have a government, and I think that he's done it to try and get himself in a position to get himself in there. But, you know, I mean, I think if we got him into Parliament, I think we'd all be in trouble. But
so, Jeanette, in your view, has it been a bad day for Brexit?
You know, really, it couldn't have been worse, really, could it?
No, it's a bad day. No, it's a very bad day. Jeanette, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30, and within the last few minutes, the court case in the High Court has ended for the day. Alistair Seaton Marsden, who's been on this show over the last couple of weeks and a spokesman for the family on behalf of Charlie Gard, has just said this.
Connie and Chris, the parents of Charlie Gard, apologise for not being able to be here in person. However, after a very long day in court, they wish to return to the bedside of baby Charlie. Today, Charlie's case has moved from the chances of this groundbreaking therapy working from being as close to zero as to make no difference to, according to the expert evidence that's been heard today in court, being a small but significant chance. Let's pray that British justice, that is known throughout the world for being fair, for being decent and for being compassionate, comes through for baby Charlie. The court will reconvene tomorrow at 2 p.m. Lastly, Chris and Connie wish to continue to thank all of Charlie's supporters, and I can also announce that as of about 5 minutes ago, the main petition for Charlie Gard, the one at citizengo.org, has just gone through the 500,000 mark. On that one petition alone, citizengo.org, we're hoping to get 1 million signatures. Thank you very much. I won't be taking any questions on behalf of the family today.
Well, Alistair Seaton Marsden there speaking on behalf of Connie and Chris, the parents of Charlie Gard, after what has been a very long and at times pretty emotional day in court. The parents got pretty upset this morning with one or two of the things that the judge said. He was introducing a note of optimism from their point of view, saying that the American medical evidence, which I mentioned earlier on in the show, says there is a chance that this baby could get a bit better. I'm hoping that we'll get a chance to hear from Alistair between now and the top of the programme. He did tell me this morning he wouldn't be speaking to any other media other than giving a statement, but he would try and come to LBC first. So we'll wait for a call from Alistair. Meanwhile, back to the events in Brussels today, and that charming man, Monsieur Barnier, who always shakes my hand and is always so charming, who looked a little bit different yesterday, a little bit more peppery yesterday, and despite previous assurances they wouldn't do this, he's had meetings today with other party leaders and national leaders, namely from Scotland, Wales, and the leader of the Labour Party. And I think this is very bad news for the Brexit process. I think it puts Mrs May and David Davis in a very difficult position. I think Barnier is playing divide and rule. I think he's doing his best to ignore the result of the British referendum. And I don't like it one little bit, nor does Julia in the West Midlands. She says, Nigel, they are underhanded little sneaks. We need to walk away and get on with it. The rest of the world is out there waiting. I think it's wrong that we've got Sturgeon, Corbyn and Jones going behind the government's back. It's making our country look splintered, says Dr Freeman on Twitter. I'm leaving Labour for what is going on, and yet I'm a staunch Labour supporter and have been for years. So, yeah, quite a lot of really strong opinion. I wonder what Karen in Worthing thinks of today's events and what it means for Brexit.
Hello there, Nigel.
Good evening.
I think it's the rebellion of the Remainers again. We're not going to be allowed to leave. And also, another thing that I find very concerning but predictable is that Nicky Morgan has been voted chair of the Treasury Select Committee, who is a Remainer. Crispin Blunt, who's actually my MP in Redhill, because that's where I live, he has been replaced on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee by, I predict, a Remainer. So there's something funny going on in Parliament as well as in the EU. And as I said, I think it is rebellion of the Remainers. And as for Corbyn, supposedly is anti-Brussels. Well, he's just an opportunist.
Karen, you're there from Worthing. I take it from your tone that you were a leaver.
Definitely.
Definitely, right. So if we have this rebellion of the Remainers, and let's say, Karen, they succeed. Let's say the whole Brexit thing gets watered down so much that all we've done is to leave but in name. Will you, as a leaver, be looking to rebel?
Absolutely, because I'm very, very anti-Brussels. I want us to stand on our own 2 feet. I don't want to be dictated to by Brussels. We're independent up until we join the then common market, and I'm passionate about leaving the EU.
So what would you do, Karen? Do you know? Is it a bit too early to ask that?
I don't know, to be honest, what I would do. I'd have to seek advice from you.
Right, fair enough. OK, well, I'm ready. I mean, I had all those pitchforks out during the referendum campaign. I've locked them back in the garden shed, but if your suspicions are true, we might need to go on the march again. Karen from Worthing, I thank you very much. William from Altrincham. So, a good or bad day for the Prime Minister's negotiating hand?
Absolutely appalling. I mean, the whole thing is a disaster. I think Mrs May has, again, just given up a massive opportunity.
Explain.
Well, you know, they are, to me, Brexit was a massive opportunity to repair many of the problems that we have in this country. For instance, the peculiar settlement that's come from the Brexit, the devolution settlement that came from and Tony Blair.
Yeah.
Whereas Wales has a parliament and Wales has an assembly and Scotland has a parliament, and it's all a big mishmash. And the Conservatives had a massive opportunity to reunite the whole United Kingdom with the general election and really possibly even drive towards a federal UK, which would have resolved many of these issues and presented the UK as a strong, united nation ready to do a Brexit deal. And it's just another example of where Theresa May has weakened her hand yet again.
So not played her cards very well, William, in your view?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, you know, the people in Europe and the people in the devolved administrations know exactly how to divide the United Kingdom and to weaken it.
Yeah,
well, and they know, and also, you know, after going into the election, the polls were so that many people in these devolved parties would have ended up with egg on their face, and they now are paying political payback because you know the Conservatives had, with a massive poll lead that they had a golden opportunity.
So what should Mrs May now do, William? I mean, you identify that she's made mistakes. Does she need to ratchet this whole thing up a gear? Does she need to fight back by flying tomorrow to Warsaw or meeting the Polish government and say to Barnier, well, you can play this game, I can? Or is she just the wrong person to do this?
Unfortunately, Nigel, I think she's just the wrong person. And I say that as a very loyal Conservative. And I really don't know what to do, because the whole thing has turned into a huge mess.
William?
And I'm very, very, very worried.
William, it's not pretty. I agree with you. I thank you very much for your call. I get a tweet here. They are traitors and should all be sent to the Tower of London. Gosh, that's old-fashioned stuff. Can someone tell Carwyn Jones that Wales voted out and ask him to get his nose out of the EU gravy train, says Rita. I thought Leavers were all about democracy. How is it undemocratic for our political party leaders to be directly involved and to be informed about negotiations? Odd attitude, in my humble opinion. Well, the point surely is this, that we have a British government that was democratically elected. We do, you're quite right, have an opposition whose job it is to hold it to account, but not to get in the middle of negotiations that are going on between the two sides, given that those negotiations are taking place in the national interest. Graham says everyone's spoiling Brexit. Scotland and Wales are acting childishly. Karen says, Nigel, if May was more forthcoming with the details, other parties might not go poking about. It should be an all-party transparent issue. It affects everybody. Karen, if the Prime Minister was to have a representative committee or task force in London that she headed, and she listened to opinions, and she and Davis went to negotiate and came back and reported to it, then I think in many ways that would be a very, very good idea. Now, I've just seen Alistair Seaton Marsden walking into the LBC building. He did promise us that he would speak to us exclusively after today's court case. So what we'll do now is we'll take a short break and then go exclusively to Alistair. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC, and it's 7:45. Well, I said to you that Alistair Seaton Marsden, the spokesman for Charlie Gard's parents and for the family, would talk exclusively to LBC after a long, very hard day, I understand, in court. Alistair, welcome to the programme and good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
I understand it's been a long day. Just talk us through roughly what happened today, please.
Well, it was a very long day in court. We ended up running till past 6:30. Which is very long. The court normally only sits till 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it was a very long day. It was a very stressful day, certainly for Chris and Connie, mum and dad, or dad and mum. But you know, I'm optimistic with what I heard. We had an expert witness who there is a press embargo as to his name, but we refer to him as Witness I, who's an expert. And
this is an American expert, is it?
He is an American expert.
And was he actually?
And he's really the expert.
Was he in court today, or how did it work?
He was in court via a
link.
Via satellite link.
Okay. So what did he say?
And there were other witnesses as well available via satellite link, but it was really Witness I who was speaking. Well, I would say that we really moved the case from being, as it was described, I think, in the original High Court hearing. and then was re-described in the Supreme Court, the most senior court in the British land, from being really as close to zero as to make no difference. Okay, but what we heard today, according to the expert evidence, okay, was that there was now a small but significant change.
Yeah.
Chance, what I'm saying, of this groundbreaking treatment working. And actually, for a lot of it's technical. I don't have a medical or scientific background, so some of the real technical details are hard for me to follow. But certain aspects of the case, we weren't just hearing up to 10%, which is what the mother's been saying, but for certain parts of the treatment, not all the treatment, we're actually hearing a figure of up to 56%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's technical. That's not a 56% by any means a full recovery. But really, what we were hearing today, certainly to me, as a layperson in this, really seemed to say to me that what Mummy has been saying all along, Connie and Dad, Chris, is correct.
Because the judge had said he wanted evidence, didn't he? So you feel slightly more optimistic in that some of that evidence got produced today.
Yes, and indeed, the expert, witness I, or Dr. I can call him, is himself more optimistic, because within the last 3 months since he last gave evidence, he is even more positive because he's got new stats, he's seen new evidence and so on, so he's actually more positive than he was when he gave 3 months ago, and he could actually put certain statistical probabilities behind certain aspects of
so the judge,
condition.
And as you say, most unusual for a court hearing to go on as late as it did. So at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning,
afternoon,
sorry, I got that very badly wrong. 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, the court reconvenes. So you're expecting to get a judgment then, are you?
It would be nice. I mean, the sooner Charlie is on a plane, air ambulance, to the States or to the hospital in the Vatican, then absolutely the better. However, what the judge is currently talking about, he asked witness I whether or not he is prepared to fly over within a matter of the next few days to visit Charlie together and to convene almost a medical panel together to reassess him. So there is likely to be yet again a further delay, but I, as a layman, I don't understand what the delay is. There is clearly a chance of treatment.
We may not get a judgment tomorrow on this either way.
Correct.
We may not. Yeah. Okay. And finally and importantly, I mean, how on earth are Connie and Chris bearing up to all of this?
Well, tonight all they wanted to do was to get back to the hospital to see baby Charlie, look after him. They normally always try to make sure that at least one of them is by the bedside, but obviously court is an exception. The other exception they will very occasionally make is for interviews, but at the moment they haven't been doing any interviews, and I can't see them doing any in the future for quite some time. So, they were exhausted.
Tough.
They were very emotional. There was a very emotional. They felt like they were being misquoted late morning in court, and unfortunately they stormed out of court. I think with quite some justification, actually, Nigel.
Yeah, I had heard that. And a new supporter for the campaign, Ted Cruz, American politician, at one point the front runner, of course, to become the presidential candidate for the Republicans. Of course, Trump beat him. I stand with #CharlieGuard. So Ted Cruz now coming out swinging in support of infant Charlie. And can I say to you, well done for everything you've done on the campaign. And your petition's building. Ted Cruz is on it.
I'll tell you what, thank you for the news. I had no idea about Ted Cruz, but I'll tell you what happened 5 minutes before I walked out the gates to go and speak to the press. There are 7 petitions up online in total.
Yeah.
But one of those petitions, the petition at citizengo.org, went through the 500,000 mark of signatures.
Fantastic.
And our target for that petition at citizengo.org is to get 1 million signatures. So I'd have a big appeal to everyone, all your LBC listeners, Nigel, and all the listeners to LBC, to please go to citizengo.org, sign that petition, and ask 6 friends or a dozen friends and acquaintances and colleagues to do the same, and then we'll get to the 1 million mark.
Thank you. Alice at Seaton Marsden, you're fighting a very strong, brave campaign, giving little Charlie's parents all the support they need. Thank you for coming in and giving us this exclusive interview. Thank you. Well, wow, it just is the most extraordinary case, raising a lot of emotions. The central question we were debating was the leaders of the Labour Party, Scotland and Wales, going in and meeting Monsieur Barnier today, and I'm putting it to you that that's actually very bad news for the Brexit process and indeed for Theresa May's position as Prime Minister and David Davis's as the Brexit Minister. I'm asking whether you agree or disagree. Rob in Liverpool, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right. So what do you think? Is this a good day or a bad day?
Well, I never thought I'd agree with you on anything, Nigel,
right.
being a Remain voter. But the people chose otherwise, and we need to execute on the Leave strategy. So I think here we have a conspiracy across a number of different political parties here. I just see sandbagging, deliberate intent to derail the Brexit process with the intention, I could only surmise, as bringing this back as another referendum with an atrocious deal presented in front of the people with the intention to reverse all the decision that was put forward last June.
I mean, that's the point, Rob, isn't it? That actually, if Brussels think that there's a chance that they can work with, the SNP or the Welsh First Minister or perhaps sections of the Labour Party, if Brussels think they can work with these people in an attempt to force a second referendum, they've no incentive to give us a good deal at all, have they?
I think that's the point, and I think even extend that to members of the Conservative Party and current government. Don't want to spell too much in the conspiracy theory, Nigel, but no. I'm of an opinion that, Theresa May had a prime opportunity to seal, a majority, and the woeful, campaign pretty much undermined the whole deal. And I can only imagine, was that intentional? Was that deliberate to kind of weaken the position of the government?
Well, I don't believe, Rob. I've heard this.
I know.
I've heard this before, Rob, from a few callers. Over the course of the last month or two. I don't think a sitting prime minister calls a general election to weaken her position. As part of some big game. I just don't believe that's possible.
No, I do take the point, but you're looking at. I just see right from David Cameron had the opportunity to execute Article 50 the day after, like he said he was going to, and I see after that point. It was, that was sandbagging again. Woeful inability to actually execute on anything. And I just wonder, but do people actually have the appetite in government to get on and execute the process, or what is the agenda? Because time is dragging away, and meanwhile,
as Monsieur Barnier said yesterday, the clock is ticking, and he's not wrong, is he?
It certainly is, and I see that people are just going to get nervous about this, and it will. Well, I just see that a new referendum will be put forward with a
not again.
Poor deal, and we'll be back in the same place again with maybe a different decision.
Do you know what, Rob?
Raised.
Do you know what, Rob? They've made the Danes vote again in a European referendum. They made the Irish twice vote again in a referendum. They ignored the Dutch, they ignored the French, they ignored the Greeks. Do you know something, Rob? I genuinely think, and I mean this, that if Brexit gets unravelled and if the political class put to us a second referendum, whatever they tell us the consequences will be, I reckon, Rob, we would vote for Brexit by a much, much bigger majority. Honestly, I do.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. Certainly my decision would change, and I'd probably be looking to leave at this stage.
That's it. That's the point I'm making. I think a lot of people would say we've been mucked about enough. Rob, I thank you very much indeed for your call. It's the last call of the evening. We've talked a lot about this, and my final thought tonight on this is prompted by David from London. And he texted in. He said, "Why are we not on aircraft headed for China, Japan, Australia, the USA and Canada? Why do we keep acting honourably Time to get down and dirty, just like the EU. David from London, you are absolutely bang on the money. Any sensible rules of engagement that we had between us and Brussels were blown out of the water today by Barnier, and it's time we started ignoring their rules and started getting our own trade deals ready across the rest of the world. It's a great, big, exciting future. We just need to grab it. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back on Monday at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Nick Abbott, standing in for Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. Now, coming up at 9, it's the Property Hour. This week we